So we'll start with the um, normal physiology. Or biochemistry. Behind maintaining blood glucose levels. Okay. So we'll focus on this, the main topic today, right? So what is our goal in so maintaining glucose levels? So what's the normal glucose levels in our blood vessels? Like usually a normal plasma glucose levels. So this is so you have a blood vessel. Usually you have 100 grams per deciliter, right?
Right.
Usually that's the normal fasting levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're not eating, so this is what we consider fasting glucose levels, right? So, but when you're feeding, like actually eating, right? So that 100 grams of glucose per deciliter normally is 100, right? But now since you're eating, this may be like, I don't know, maybe go up to 300, 400, or even 500, right? Depending on how much you're eating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also depends on like what type of meal you're eating. If you're eating carbohydrate, like rich meal, so this will even spike even more, right? It also depends on if you're eating like something called fructose. Some of these things you're eating may have a fructose syrup, right? So it all depends on like glycemic index of the foods.
Absolutely.
Right. So if the glycemic index is really high, these things will enter into your bloodstream really like fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So which means that your blood glucose levels will be maybe 500, 600, right? So which is kind of, like kind of deviating from your normal 100, right? So what do? You need to remove the extra, whatever the extra is above the 100, you need to remove back into your tissue. You need to store it or burn it, right? Or can do other anabolic things or make some things, right, from these things, from this glucose. So this is the main things you should always keep in mind. So normal glucose levels, 100 grams per deciliter. But when you're eating, these sugar levels, this blood glucose level shoots up. That really depends on what type of meal you're eating, right? And then if you have more than 100, you need to remove all this, excess amount of glucose, right? And that's what we call feeding pathways, right? So which we'll go into detail, right? And we'll talk about when you don't remove this excess amount of glucose, what happens, right? That is abnormal physiology, and then you go into DKA, you go into HHS, and all of those things, which we'll talk about later.
Which is something we see a lot of in the hospital.
Right. So for that, let's just talk about we'll start with the feeding pathways first, and then we will go into fasting pathways, and we'll talk about why do you even need 100 grams of glucose and all of that stuff. Okay. So the next thing